Nadezhda Ivanovna, whom her loved ones simply called Nadia, had a figure reminiscent of a ripe pear and long, silver-streaked hair that still shimmered with a youthful glow. Her eyes, by general consensus, were so expressive that men lost their words the moment they met her gaze. She never bragged, she merely stated a fact. There was something about her that could fill a room with a special, almost palpable energy. When her daughter Lenachka arrived in the village with her husband, Semyon, Nadezhda Ivanovna immediately noticed a certain emptiness in their eyes. They lived as if by inertia, like drinking tea without sugar. The taste was there, but it brought no real joy. Semyon, a sturdy man, had hands that could both confidently wield an axe and tenderly embrace a woman around the waist, making hearts flutter. Yet something vital was missing in him, the spark that gives life its brilliance. At least, it was missing for now. Their first day was filled with bustle. The garden demanded attention, the beds wouldn't weed themselves. The old furniture in the shed had long awaited a man's touch. To his credit, Semyon didn't shy away from work. The axe moved effortlessly in his hands, sweat trickling down his temples, while Nadezhda Ivanovna stood on the porch with a pitcher of kvass, involuntarily watching her son-in-law. She didn't do it on purpose, it was just that his movements were so assured and strong. Lena, her daughter, busied herself with chores, going down to the cellar or fetching water. And Nadezhda Ivanovna kept watching her son-in-law. He, of course, noticed her glances but pretended not to. Men of his age, past 50, often behaved this way. Everyone understood, yet all remained silent until circumstances forced them to speak. By evening, Lena was ready to visit a friend in the neighboring village. "Mama, I'll stay the night." "You won't get bored here, will you?" she asked, kissing her mother on the cheek. Nadezhda Ivanovna merely smiled, and Semyon mumbled something vague like, "We'll manage." And so they were left alone. Nadezhda Ivanovna's house was small but cozy, with wooden floors that creaked like they were whispering ancient secrets. Outside, a summer evening reigned. The air was filled with the scent of cut grass and jasmine. Nadezhda Ivanovna put on a light cotton dress adorned with tiny daisies. It flowed softly over her figure, neither clinging nor hiding what needed to be seen. She let her hair down, allowing the breeze to play with it. Not for anyone in particular, of course, just for herself. Or perhaps, not quite. The next morning, Semyon went out to mow the grass. Nadezhda Ivanovna stood at the kitchen window, stirring jam, and watched him work. The scythe in his hands made a melodic sound. The grass fell in neat rows, and sunlight danced across his shoulders. His shirt clung to his back, and she couldn't help but think that time hadn't spoiled him. He was a man in his prime, just as her late husband used to describe his friends. Nadezhda Ivanovna stepped onto the porch with a pitcher of water, set it on the table, and called out, "Semyon, take a break before the sun burns you." He turned, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, and smiled. His smile was warm but carried a barely perceptible shadow, as if he were hiding something. He approached, took the mug, and drank it in one gulp. Nadezhda Ivanovna stood beside him, arms crossed, as the wind gently fluttered the hem of her dress. "It's nice here, Nadezhda Ivanovna," he said, gazing toward the meadow. "Peace, space, you can't find this in the city." "Call me Nadia," she corrected with a smile. "And silence comes in many kinds. Sometimes words aren't needed, other times, your thoughts get so heavy that even silence becomes unbearable." He looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes, not surprise, not embarrassment, but something deeper. As if he were seeing her for the first time. Nadezhda Ivanovna didn't look away, letting him understand she wasn't the kind to avert her gaze. The moment hung in the air like a butterfly about to take flight. "I'll go back to mowing," he finally said, setting the mug down. But his voice was slightly hoarse, as if his throat had gone dry, not from labor. "Mow away, then," she drawled, watching him walk off. "Go on, Semyonka, mow, but don't cut yourself." He didn't turn around, but Nadezhda Ivanovna noticed how his shoulders tensed. She went inside, feeling her heart beat just a little faster than usual. In that moment, she realized this day would change everything. Not because she'd planned it, she wasn't the scheming type. It was simply that the air was charged with something, like before a storm, when you know lightning will strike but can't guess where. Back at the jam pot, her thoughts drifted far from cooking. Images circled in her mind, Semyon working, his hands gripping the scythe, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. She wasn't some blushing girl, but warmth spread through her chest like a sip of homemade wine, and she knew he felt it too. Men his age were like dry wood, all it took was a single spark to set everything ablaze. By lunchtime, Nadezhda Ivanovna had set the table on the veranda. Simple fare, potatoes with dill, freshly picked cucumbers, sour cream, and bread she'd baked herself. "Come eat," she said with a smile. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" he asked, squinting slightly. His tone was playful, but his eyes said something else. "For life, Semyon." "Right here, on this land," she replied, meeting his gaze squarely before turning toward the garden beds, pretending to be busy. In truth, she just wanted to give him space, to let him sort out whatever was stirring in his mind. She watered the tomatoes, stealing glances at him from the corner of her eye. He worked, but distractedly, as if his thoughts were elsewhere, far from grass and scythes. Just as he seemed to be wrapping up, something unexpected happened. Nadezhda Ivanovna nearly jumped. Semyon, the strong, steady man, tripped over a cursed tree stump jutting from the earth like a treacherous spy. The scythe flew from his hands, and he lost his balance, crashing right into the lawnmower standing nearby. Nadezhda Ivanovna dropped the watering can and rushed to him, her heart sinking to her feet. "Are you alive?" she cried, kneeling beside him on the lush grass. He lay there, dazed, eyes wide open, seemingly unsure whether he'd survived the fall unscathed. "Nadezhda. Nadia," he mumbled, trying to sit up. "I think I'm alive." But his voice wavered, as if he were checking each part of his body one by one. She leaned closer, the scent of fresh-cut grass mingling with his warmth, so real, so masculine. She didn't know what compelled her, but she firmly grasped his shoulders, helping him into a sitting position. He looked at her, and in his eyes was something, not fear, not pain, but something else, perhaps not even fully understood by him yet. "Let's see what we've got here, hero," she said, trying to keep her voice light, though inside she trembled. She wasn't a doctor, but rural life had taught her to tell a scratch from a serious injury. "Lie still. Don't move." She tugged gently at the hem of his sweat-dampened t-shirt and lifted it. His skin was tanned, marked with lines that spoke of hard labor, not gym workouts. Her fingers traced his ribs, checking for injuries. He flinched, but not from pain. She knew it instantly. Her hands slid to his neck. She tilted his head slightly, checking for bruises. Their faces were so close she could feel his breath, warm, slightly uneven. She looked down at him, he looked up at her. The moment was like a taut string, just a little more tension, and something might snap. "Does anything hurt?" she asked, not breaking eye contact. Her voice came out softer than intended. "No, seems fine," he replied, but his voice cracked, and she saw his gaze slide over her face, then dip slightly toward the neckline of her dress. It was simple, lightweight, yet under his look she felt as if she wore nothing at all. Not vulgarly, oh no, but as if he glimpsed something in her he hadn't seen in others for a long time. She continued examining his arms slowly, unhurriedly. The scratches were minor, just a couple of red lines on his forearm. Nothing serious. But she didn't pull away. Her fingers lingered on his wrist, where a vein pulsed faintly. He watched her, and she knew he felt the same thing she did, a warmth spreading through the body when two people are too close. "You got lucky," she finally said, leaning back and wiping her hands on her dress. "But watch your step, Semyon, next time, I might not save you." He laughed, and so did she. The laughter was light, yet carried something more, as if they both knew this moment wasn't mere coincidence. They sat on the grass beside the scythe and the overturned mower, and she felt the air between them thicken. The sun was setting, bathing everything in warm hues. In that light, his face looked younger, more alive. "Well then, son-in-law," she said, rising and offering her hand, "let's go inside. I'll treat you, I'll show you my best remedy." He took her hand, and she felt his fingers linger just slightly in her palm, not much, but enough for her to understand. He wasn't just getting up, he was testing how far this could go. She helped him stand, and they walked toward the house slowly, as if reluctant to let the evening end. Inside, she seated him at the table and fetched an old tin box of herbs and ointments. He sat quietly, watching her fuss. She applied a herbal salve to his scratches, trying not to meet his eyes, but it was difficult. His skin was warm, and her fingers seemed to leave behind not just ointment, but something else too, an invisible trace, felt but unseen. "You're quite the doctor, Nadia," he said, his voice teasing but carrying something deeper. "Where'd you learn all this?" "Life taught me," she replied with a smile. "Men, you know, are always getting into trouble, and I'm always there to pull them out." He looked at her, and she knew he'd heard more than just words. Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. She turned away to pour tea, but she could feel his eyes on her. Her light dress swayed slightly with her movements, and she knew he was watching. "What's gotten into you, son-in-law?" she said, forcing a playful tone. "Tripped like a schoolboy." He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and finally met her eyes. There was a shadow in them, as if he were arguing with himself. "Just got lost in thought," he said quietly. "Things haven't been sweet for me lately, Nadia." She froze, still holding his hand, and smiled, not the smile she gave everyone, but the one meant just for him. "Maybe I should sweeten it for you," she teased, laughing. But her laughter rang like a little bell, light, yet suggestive. He didn't answer, just looked at her in a way that made the air in the room grow heavier. She turned away, pretending to be busy, but her heart pounded like a girl's. And then she decided, not with words, not with actions, but with something greater. She began healing not just his scratches, but what ached within. It wasn't quiet or gentle, it was loud and bold, like a summer storm. She spoke to him as no one had in a long time, about life fading like an old dress, and how all it takes is a new color to bring everything back to life. Her words were like wind-rustling curtains, vivid, alive, yet tinged with something forbidden. She turned to Semyon, looking straight into his eyes. "You're a real man, Semyon, strong, worthy, but your life is stuck on tracks. Life isn't rails. It's a vast field where you can run freely, stumble, rise again, feel everything so a man can live as he truly wants." He stayed silent, but she saw his chest rise and fall, absorbing every word. She leaned in slightly to adjust the bandage on his arm, and her hair brushed his shoulder. He shivered, and she knew it wasn't from the ache in his side that he'd been rubbing. Their eyes met, and in that instant, everything drew unbearably close. Then she gave him something healing, swiftly, skillfully mending his inner wounds. It was clear he'd been suffering, and that he desperately needed this. She needed it too, she had her own wounds. It didn't last long. His side reminded him of itself, and he winced, breaking the moment after 15 minutes. But what had happened could not be undone, the bruise seemed to grumble. Still, they laughed as if nothing had occurred, though the laughter was taut as a violin string. She handed him tea, but inside, she felt everything had changed. Semyon sat at the table, spoon in hand, but she noticed how his gaze kept stealing toward her whenever Lena was distracted. Dinner had become a true test. Lena chattered non-stop about her friend and village gossip.